What happens when the demand for renewable electricity surges, but the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining? The future of renewable energy hinges on clean flexibility, the ability to store and distribute renewable power efficiently. From batteries to smarter energy policies, innovation is driving a new era of sustainability. But how do we ensure that policymakers, businesses, and everyday consumers understand these crucial shifts? Hey everybody, I'm your host, Stephen Schauer, and welcome to Stories Sustain Us. This is a podcast where we explore the incredible stories of people who are shaping a more sustainable world. Today we're diving into the complex and ever-evolving world of clean energy with a remarkable guest who has dedicated her career to making energy data accessible, understandable, and actionable. In this episode, I sit down with Kostantsa Rangelova, an expert in global energy markets and a passionate advocate for informed decision-making in the clean energy transition. Her journey began in Bulgaria, where her childhood experiences in the 90s sparked an early interest in energy. What started as a dream of becoming a journalist transformed into a career in energy policy after a pivotal college class changed her perspective. Living in France further broadened her worldview, reinforcing her belief in adaptability and exploration, values instilled in her by her adventurous grandfather. Today at Ember, she works to demystify energy policy, using data-driven insights to push for a cleaner, more flexible, and more sustainable future. From geopolitics to personal consumer choices, we'll discuss why energy is more than just a commodity. It's a dynamic force shaping the world around us. Kostantsa will break down the role of think tanks in policymaking, the importance of clean flexibility in our power grids, and why technological innovation and consumer empowerment are the keys to an unstoppable clean energy transition. Kostantsa Rangelova is a leading voice in energy policy analysis, working with Ember's Global Insights team to accelerate the shift to green electricity. With extensive experience in global energy markets, she champions data-led solutions to foster informed public debate on the fast-changing energy landscape. Before joining Ember, she worked as a senior energy and climate analyst at the Center for the Study of Democracy, a European public policy institute, and led the downstream research team at JBC Energy, an independent energy market research center in Vienna. The transition to clean energy isn't a question of if. It's happening right now. But for it to succeed, we need data, policy, and people working together to make informed choices. So how do we bridge the gap between complex data and real-world action? Let's find out as we dive into this insightful conversation with Kostantsa Rangelova here on Stories Sustain Us, where we're inspiring action through the power of storytelling. All right. Hey, Kostantsa, how are you? Welcome to Stories Sustain Us.
Hello, I'm great. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so honored and grateful that you came on the show. Thank you for accepting the invitation. And we were chatting before the recording started, and I'm here in Seattle. It's early in the morning for me, and it's early evening for you in what part of Bulgaria, I think you said you were in?
Capital city, Sofia.
Nice.
Yeah, already wrapping up the day.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking some time to join me. I'm looking forward to learning more about clean flexibility and your work at Ember. But let's learn a little bit more about you first. So tell us your story. Like, where did you grow up, and how did you what was your journey to get to working on clean energy solutions for us and for the planet?
Yeah, I grew up here in Sofia, Bulgaria, but it took me a little bit of time to actually get back here. So it was a very big circle I made
Yeah.
before coming back here. So I grew up in Sofia, and when I was 18, I moved to France, where I
Okay.
did my university studies. I did political science as a bachelor's, and then energy policy and economics as a master's. So already by then I was very much an energy nerd. I did a few internships in France in power companies like EDF and Orano, and then I moved to Vienna for my first real life job, which was market analysis on a global level So I was working lots and lots with energy companies across the world, advising them on energy prices, supply, demand, different trends.
Yeah.
And this got on until about COVID. And when
Okay.
that hit, basically it was a major wake-up call about, priorities and family. And it was quite stressful to be separated from my family for such an extended period of time. I couldn't travel back very easily for a
Sure,
very
sure,
long
sure.
period of time.
Yeah.
And in this moment of reflection, I was like, okay, let's think about what I want to do with my life further on. And I started a transition to the NGO sector. So I joined a local think tank here in Sofia called Center for the Study of Democracy, started working on energy and climate policy here in the context of Central and Eastern Europe. And this was around 2021.
Yeah.
And basically in 2023, I decided I wanted to tackle global questions again and bigger picture, which is why I joined Ember, which is a global think tank, also working on energy and climate.
Wonderful synopsis of your full circle journey. Let me take you back to the beginning a little bit and ask you, what was it like growing up in Sofia? And family's clearly really important to you. So, do you have siblings? And what was your childhood like a little bit? What was it like growing up for you?
Yeah, it was interesting because I'm a 90s kid. And when I was growing up, Bulgaria had just transitioned from communism to
Wow.
a democracy.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
90s were particularly interesting in Bulgaria. And actually, it's very much related to why I found electricity to be such a fascinating thing and such a magical thing. Because in the early 90s, when I was a kid, we still had power cuts and power shortages quite often. So we
Sure.
did have candles for when the electricity went out in the evening, and you needed the candles to have the light. So it was very interesting and challenging, but also quite fun because we didn't have the digital technologies that people grow up with
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
So yeah, but at the same time, it was really nice to then move away from Bulgaria and step into a whole different way of thinking when I moved to France. I also spent a year in Russia, so very, very international, I would say, and it has been very enriching. But like going back to your roots here in Sofia has always been very, very close to my heart, and like being able to come back to where it all started has been super important.
Yeah. Yeah. It's growing up in the States, and I was late teenager, early 20s in the late 80s and early 90s, finishing my high school into my university years, when the collapse of the Soviet Union happened. And, watching it from here is one thing, seeing it on the news. And, I remember as a young person, the hope that I was experiencing of like, oh, maybe the world is heading a better direction, of a more peaceful direction. I can imagine there was a lot of turmoil and uncertainty, for you and your family being in the transition. Am I imagining the right story, or can you
Yeah,
talk a little bit more about
absolutely.
that? Because that just seems so fascinating to speak with someone who was experiencing that transition, not just me watching it, but you were in it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a very uncertain time with lots of things changing all the time. Very exciting things happening on the news all the time. So you have to constantly adapt, but at the same time live your life and feel some sort of normality. But it also trains you to be very adaptive to change because this was a very dynamic time, like policies would change, or the political regime would change, or the economic situation would change very rapidly. Like there were periods with, as I said, like power shortages. There were periods of like very accelerated growth where people were suddenly getting lots of, purchasing power, improving their standard of living. So there's lots of back and forth, and adapting to all of these changes really makes you adaptable, but also very hopeful about basically seeing how fast things can change
Yeah.
reassures you that this can continue happening and that with the right things done from your side, you can also achieve what you're hoping for. And I think from a family perspective, this was also why I had the courage to like go to a whole different country completely alone, just being hopeful that this would bring something new and something better. And this is how it happened, actually.
Yeah. Were you the first of your family to venture out of Bulgaria to try something new like that, or did you have other older siblings that did it first, or what, because
Yeah.
it sounds very courageous to start something new like that in such a time of transition for your country.
Yeah, I'm the oldest of three, so I was the first. But I had a very good example from my grandfather,
Okay.
who used to work a lot in transport. So he would travel delivering fruits and vegetables across Europe from Bulgaria. So he had already traveled lots, even during like the communist times.
Okay.
He would travel all the way to Vienna or to Stockholm, and he had seen so much during that time. So this adventurous side of me, I think this is where it comes from.
Yeah. So even during that time of Soviet domination, he was going into Western countries and bringing back stories to you about what it was like in Stockholm. Um,
Yeah, I by the time I was born, he had already started a business here in Bulgaria.
yeah,
But I grew up with his stories about all these journeys
yeah,
that
wow,
happened during that time.
yeah. It sounds like an important part of your childhood and that connection to him and his stories. So thank you for telling me that. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah,
I appreciate
absolutely.
it. So what was growing up in Bulgaria, were you, I mean, what were your interests? You obviously eventually got into energy, but and you talked about that being part of your childhood with the candles and the loss of power and things of that. But did you know at an early age that's kind of what you wanted to do, or what were you interested in growing up?
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer.
Yeah,
And I think this is kind of what I'm still doing
yeah,
because even now, like I work a lot with data, but I'm trying to bring that data to life with an actual story and
yeah.
try to tell the story that the data has. So yeah, my dream was to become a writer, a storyteller, and even in Bulgaria we have this tradition like when the baby first starts walking, it is given like a set of items. Basically, it's supposed to walk to a table with lots of items, and whatever it picks up, it would define what career path
Oh yeah,
it will be on. And I picked up my favorite book.
yeah. Nice, nice. So you did know at an early age.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I love your connection to what you're doing today as also storytelling. I mean that's really the purpose of this show is I believe in the power of data and the power of facts and figures, but we need stories for people to understand that data. We need to be able to take all of, because not everybody, as you said, is an energy nerd. Not everybody's gonna be as deeply immersed into the data as you are. So how do you get that data into someone else's mind, and so that they can understand it and appreciate it and do something positive with it? It's through a story. So I love that connection that you've made in your life for acknowledging you are a writer, you are a storyteller, even though you deal with data every day. That to me is beautiful. I love that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. And data can be really fascinating for the right person and like making it speak to people, especially with graphical representations. I think this is very important because sometimes data can sound like daunting, like very daunting and dry, but at the same time, for the person who really lives with it, there is a story to tell. You just have to bring it to life and like show it and like paint a picture to people.
absolutely. Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. So, and I know we'll in a few more minutes we'll get into your storytelling about clean flexibility, but I love that part of your history because that's really to me telling about your career path. So, um, so you moved to France then. and started kind of your university life there. What was that like for you? Was that the first time you'd really been outside of Sofia and outside of Bulgaria?
I had traveled like tourist style, like for a
Sure.
few days, like visiting different countries with my family, but I had never like ventured out completely alone. So it was super scary. I
Yeah.
even remember basically I took a bus from Sofia to France, which took like more than 20 hours.
Yeah.
And I had two extremely large suitcases. And I almost got lost at the train station.
Oh boy.
And I had to find my dorm. And I had to completely switch from Bulgarian to French for the first time because I studied French in high school.
Sure.
And then starting to actually speak that on a daily basis with everyone was pretty challenging. But it was also very exciting. And I think this is something that is better and easier done when you're young and when you're not too scared, because I think that at my age now I would be a lot more scared knowing what would happen to me and what to expect. Like at that age you're more hopeful and you're much more courageous in terms of like you're like, okay, let's wing it, whatever happens.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, you have that invincible confidence of I'm young and I can do it. So, and you moved. Did you say Paris or what part of France did you go to?
Yeah, I was in Dijon first, which you
Dijon.
might
Okay.
know from mustard,
Yes.
like Dijon mustard, yeah. And that was pretty much what was most exciting about this this relatively provincial city in France. But it was actually really, really beautiful. I spent 2 years there, and I met lots of very, very interesting people because the university was very focused on bringing in international students,
Hmm.
and there were lots of people from all across Europe and even beyond.
Oh, nice.
So meeting all of these different people was really enriching.
Sure.
So it was really fun, even though Dijon didn't have much of a nightlife. It was quite exciting.
Yeah. Well, just that experience that you said of meeting everybody from across Europe is, I'm sure, very expansive to your young mind and help you get that global perspective that you have now in your career. So that's fantastic. And you said it was political science you were studying at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
political science, which was mostly about like constitutional law, a little bit about economics, a
Yeah.
little bit about statistics. So very, very random, but very enriching things, I would say.
Sure. Did you have an idea at that young age of what you thought you might be doing in the future? Because I know
Um,
for our stories, we evolve, we change, we grow. We think we're going to do this, but we end up doing that. So did you think you were going down a
it,
particular direction?
when I chose political science, it was because I wanted to be a journalist, which was
Oh,
like in the same direction as like storyteller,
sure. You're writing.
writer,
Yeah.
kind of thing. I was like, okay, I want to be a journalist. I want to come back to Bulgaria and be a journalist here.
Yeah.
Um, but then, like in my second year in that political science journey, I had a class on energy diplomacy. And we had this really fascinating teacher that was telling us about these gas and oil pipelines and how they connect to energy security and geopolitics. And I
Yeah.
got super excited about that. And in the third year, basically the bachelor's like degree had 3 years, and the third year we were supposed to go abroad, either to do an internship or an exchange year somewhere. And I was like, where is the most exciting thing for energy from a geopolitical perspective? And I was like, let's go to Russia.
Russia. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, so I went to St. Petersburg and took lots of energy related classes there as well. And from that point onwards, I was like, okay, energy nerd through
Yeah.
and through.
Perfect. And let me tell you what I'm thinking and make sure that I'm thinking the correct thing. I was thinking Russia too, and you're like, what is the most kind of important place? And what I'm imagining why that was and still is such an important geopolitical place with regards to energy is as I understand it, the oil and gas that's you know produced in Russia. They're obviously then the pipelines that are running across Europe and feeding power and energy to Germany and to France and to other countries. So you have these pipelines going across multiple countries with the energy source originating in Russia. We're in a time still where Russia and the West doesn't always maybe see eye to eye, to say it politely. um,
Oh yeah, and also like the context now is so much different than when I left. Like when I went to Russia, it was I think 2012,
sure.
2013. So
Okay.
it was even before Crimea
Yeah. Wow.
happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And things were still pretty calm, and people were talking about Nord Stream and gas from Russia in a very, very positive
Positive way. Yeah.
context mostly.
Yeah.
So how the tides have changed since then, I would
Sure.
say.
Because Crimea, if I remember correctly, that happened in 2014, if I'm
Yeah, yeah.
remembering my timeline correctly. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that times, and then obviously with all of the war and troubles in Ukraine and everything, it's only exacerbated the
Oh yeah.
challenges, I'm sure, with the relationships between European countries and Russia, and can't even get into my nation's
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
uh,
It's a very hard
changing
topic. But
perspectives.
what I do remember from that time is that when I was doing like energy classes in like there, most of what they teach you is about how energy is geopolitics.
Yeah,
And this was in such a big contrast to what the official political narrative was like. It's just business, but no, it's not.
yeah. That's such a great insight. And could you say that again, just to make sure the audience heard that? Because I think what you just said is really, really important about
Yeah, I mean,
that energy
energy
is
is
geopolitics.
political.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's never just business.
yeah,
Energy is political.
yeah. That's, I think, such a crucial bit of information that I don't know the average person always thinks about. Because they're just like, I just want to make sure the light turns on when I flip the switch on. They don't really think about all the geopolitical infighting that's taking place to make sure we have enough, wherever
Yeah.
you are located. So
Yeah, and it makes you think about how crucial it is. Like, I just think back about the candles we had and like how there were periods of time where power would go out and you didn't have an alternative. And like, you really understand how crucial that is and that it should never be taken for a given.
yeah, yeah, wow, that is such a powerful personal history that you have, and understanding of that. I think a lot of people in the United States may take energy for granted, and not have that appreciation that you do for it. So, thank you for kind of bringing that to our attention, because I think
Yeah, yeah,
that's a very
absolutely.
powerful and important piece of information. Um, so your 2014, 2015 time frame, you is that when you moved to Vienna, or I'm forgetting the timeline?
No, that was the last year of my bachelor. So from then I moved to Paris, where
Paris,
I
that's
did my
right.
master's degree,
Yeah,
and I stayed there until 2016. So doing 2 years of my master's and then 1 year of working at different power companies in France.
yeah,
And after that, I moved to Vienna
Vienna.
because I was actually very disappointed with Paris. I
Okay.
didn't really like living there, so I was like, where should I go next?
Yeah.
Vienna sounds nice.
Yeah. Please tell me it was, because it's on our list of places to visit.
Paris is magical to visit as a tourist.
Yeah, we've been
And
to
I did
Paris for
visit
our
it.
honeymoon, but we want to go to
Yeah,
Vienna for
absolutely.
another vacation.
When I was in high school, there was this competition where the prize was a trip to Paris for a week.
Yeah.
And basically, I fell in love with Paris during that 1 week. So I won the competition, went to Paris, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I want to study in France. I want to go to Paris.
Yeah.
And then when I actually started living there, I was like, oh, no. Very dirty, very dangerous.
Yeah, it's a big giant city. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, we want to visit Vienna one of these days. We just a little side trip here. My wife and I got married about 15 years ago, and our honeymoon was in Munich and Salzburg, and Paris was our little almost 2 week kind of European honeymoon. And I love Munich. I think it's a wonderful city, and Salzburg is just so beautiful and wonderful with the fortress on the hill and the kind of the old feel of the city, and yeah, and Paris did. We're glad we did it, there's more we'd like to go back and see. But I got the sense that even in our short time, it was like, yeah, this is kind of a big, dirty
Yeah.
city.
You're more
Beautiful and
perceptive than
lovely
me
and
when
so
I was
much
in
to
high
do.
school then.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, we want to go. We're fans of the painter Gustav Klimt, and he's got some of his work in Vienna, and we'd love to go see that. But enough about me and why I want to go to Vienna. But so tell me
No,
about
Vienna is lovely.
yeah. So tell me about your time in Vienna. Tell me why it's lovely and what you did there.
Yeah, it's a very livable city. I think Vienna has been rated like best city to live in Europe or in the world even like for many years in a row.
Yeah,
And it's very green, very well organized. Like public transport is so smooth, like you don't need a car.
yeah,
Um, and life is a very good balance between a relatively large city with a good nightlife, but at the same time is not super dangerous or super big like Paris is.
yeah.
So I think it was a very, very good balance between all these things. And it was also much closer to Bulgaria, so trips back home were also
Sure.
much easier.
Nice.
I could do them more often as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, in what were you the work you were doing? Is that was the one of the think tanks that you had worked at, or were you still
No,
in the
it was
private
a
sector
consultancy.
in?
Yeah, it was a consultancy, so I was in the private sector, uh, business analysis, market analysis for energy companies. So it was also very much focused on oil prices or gas prices, power prices, things like that. So very interesting in terms of it involved lots of travel because working with energy companies across the world means that you also get to visit them,
Sure.
talk to the people who work there, explain to them some different trends, like discuss these trends with them, get some insight back. So it was very exciting, but it was not as rewarding as working for a think tank is.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that. You left then Vienna because of COVID, and eventually wanted to get home, and you wound up at a kind of a Bulgarian think tank before you
Yeah.
wound up at Ember, the more global think tank. So what is life like at a think tank for someone who may not know? They've heard that term and they know think tanks exist. What do you do at a think tank? What's the kind of a daily work for you?
Yeah, it really depends on how, because I would say that it's very different in this Bulgarian think tank compared to Ember. And I think size has to some extent due to it. But I would say that a lot of it is about thinking about what kind of impact you want to achieve and thinking about different policy issues first and thinking about impact first. Because when you're doing business analysis in the private sector, it's about what is going to bring money to
Yeah, your
companies, what should
return on
companies
investment.
know to increase their profits.
Yeah,
And when you work in a think tank, you're thinking about what needs to change and how do we change it. And it basically is about analyzing different policies and trying to understand why they work or they don't work, trying to see, okay, can these policies be done better in this country? Can we transfer them? Things like that. So it's very different in terms of like topics as well. It's very diverse because the things that you want to work on really much depend on what's going on policy wise.
sure.
And it's very reactive as well. So, for example, if suddenly something becomes a very hot topic in Bulgaria, for example, you have to look at that with a clear eye and provide an alternative voice that basically says that, okay, politicians are saying that, but they have an agenda, they are thinking about something.
Sure.
And then you have, as an independent thinker, you can say, okay, objectively, this is how this policy is being done here and here and here, and the Bulgarian context is this, and then this is how we need to change it to make life better. So I would
Yeah.
say this is how it's like. It's about identifying issues and trying to solve them with
Nice.
an independent perspective.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation because I'm sure most people have heard of a think tank, but they might not know what happens there. So that I appreciate that. It makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
tell me, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, like, there are lots of parallels in terms of like what you do. So when I was in the private sector, I would write reports as well. So basically, you write a report that explains things, and then you write them for your audience. But then the reports and the audience are completely different when you're in the private sector and uh, when you're in a think tank.
Sure. And I like that explanation of, private sector, obviously you're trying to drive revenue, return on investment, trying to make sure that shareholders are making their money or whatnot. But it sounds like in the think tank you're thinking more broadly about, you know, social, political context and policy, and how you can help, how your ideas and your reports can help shape the direction, future direction of society, of whether it's Bulgaria or the globe. You're really trying to think of policy positions that you can share then with those in power, who can you can convince them, influence them that your idea is the right way to go, and then they have the ability to enact a new policy or change something based upon your studies and your reporting. So am I telling that correctly?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also, it's very different. Like when you think about, for example, what Ember is doing. So we are collecting lots and lots of data about power generation in different countries or electricity demand. So all of these data is freely available. So you provide it and you want people to go and look, and you want as many people as possible to have access to this and to easily look and check and see what's going on. And when you're doing this in the private sector, it's completely opposite. So basically
Sure.
your clients have to pay for you to give them the data and the insight, and this is hidden and behind paywalls. And you want is like, it's the perspective of as little people as possible have to know,
Sure.
and you
That
share
makes
as
sense.
little as possible with the general public, and it's only a few eyes that actually have access to the data.
Yeah. That's also, I think, an important distinction. So thank you for clarifying that too. And that makes, obviously a lot of sense from a private business. They don't want to share their data with competitors or others.
Yeah,
So that
yeah,
makes a lot of
exactly.
sense. Yeah. So tell me about life at Ember. Tell me about what it is that what is Ember, and what is it that you do there?
Yeah, Ember is an amazing place to work, both in terms of like the energy and the people who work there, but also in terms of like access to this amazing data that team is collecting. So basically, it's an energy think tank with a global focus, and the focus is very strongly on data and policy. And we have a whole team dealing with collecting, curating all this data, and then lots and lots of analysts that actually trying to bring the data to life and tell the story behind the data, and a whole team that tries to do like beautiful visualizations that show the data as clearly as possible, and trying to really bring forward these messages that the text is also trying to explain in a
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we have several focuses. So we have European teams working on European energy policy, but also we have teams in Asia doing local policies there, and we also have a global perspectives team, which I'm actually part of, which is trying to bring everything together and try to look at the big picture about where the world is going in terms of the energy transition, because this is essentially what we are trying to do. So the world is currently going from a past where we just burn fossil fuels to provide our energy
Yeah.
into an electrified, clean power and clean energy system, and then trying to do that as efficiently as possible, as beneficial, making sure that all these opportunities are being, harnessed by people, and doing that by providing this data freely available to everyone, and trying ourselves to analyze this data and bring forward the key messages, like looking at this data on a daily basis and seeing like, okay, what's going on? Where's the world going? Where is it going fast? Why is it going faster here and not there? What is making the change? What is driving this? And can this
Yeah.
be replicated elsewhere? This is the questions we're trying to answer.
Big questions. Those are
Oh yeah.
particularly all the teams, but your team on the global scale. These are big, important questions, and I stumbled upon your work. I look through news services and all kinds of different sources to find stories that are fascinating to me that I can then go, oh, I'll invite this person on the show. And that's how I came across your work. I saw an article about a clean flexibility report that I believe you were one of the key authors of, and I read the report, and it made a lot of sense to me, and it was yes, technical beyond some of my understanding of energy, but it was still it just resonated with me of like this makes sense. This is a direction we should be going in. So
Thank you.
yeah, well, thank you for your work, and thank you for accepting the invitation, because I wanted to know more about it. So tell me and tell the audience, what is clean flexibility, and what is kind of the basis of this idea that you had in this report?
Yeah, absolutely. So, clean flexibility is how you make sure that electricity is clean, not just in the sunny and windy hours. And it is a solution to what you would call a problem, because when you talk to lots of the naysayers about the energy transition, like when you talk about wind and solar
Yeah.
energy, they would tell you, oh, but the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow, like as if this is like a big mystery being revealed. Like, okay, we didn't think about that.
Shocker.
But basically, clean flexibility is how you make sure that you still have electricity even when the sun is not shining and when the wind is not blowing. And there are different ways of doing that. And the way you can kind of explain it is that if you understand the energy system, and especially the power system, as an organism,
Yeah.
wind and solar would be the heart, because they're the main sources that are currently growing. They're providing all of the growth in clean electricity globally, and they're pumping this energy into it. But at the same time, you also need a brain. And clean flexibility is the brain that makes sure that the whole system keeps working, and that all of this clean electricity is being distributed when it's needed, and that
Yeah.
it doesn't break down.
I love that analogy, and that makes helps me, and hopefully helps others kind of understand this. And I think there in the report, there were kind of like 9 different tools
Yeah,
that are used by this brain, in that
absolutely.
analogy, that can then help regulate and manage the energy produced by the heart,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that to make sure that it's all of that energy is getting to where it needs to be, regardless of the clouds or the wind. So can you talk a little bit about what those tools are? And first, if I captured that right? If I didn't,
Yeah.
please correct me. But if
No, no,
but
no. This is like you understood that perfectly. This is exactly how it is. So you have the heart and you have the brain, and then the brain has these 9 tools about how it does it. Because the thing is, when you have electricity, you basically have to match supply and demand perfectly at all times.
right,
Otherwise, you're going to have a power cut, which means that at all times, supply needs to match demand.
right,
And this is seems like it's difficult to do when like the sun stops shining and the wind stops blowing, but there are different ways that you can actually make sure that these two match, and this is what the brain is doing. So the first thing is that you can store the electricity, and you can do that in different ways, but basically when there is more than you need, you put it in storage, and then when there is less than you need, you take it out of the storage, and
right,
this is how you balance it out. The other way is to do some shifting of the demand, and then basically making sure that you consume a little bit less when there is not enough. And then when there is a very big abundance, you try to concentrate all of that consumption in that period when there is more sun and more wind.
right,
There is also the sharing aspect of it, because you have different electricity systems that can be interconnected. And in certain parts of the world, it might be sunny and windy, but in other parts of the world, it's not as sunny and windy, and you can transfer electricity between these places, or there are different demand patterns. So there could be very high demand in one place, not as much in another place, and you're trying to share that across space, not just across time.
yeah,
And finally, there is the supply side that can also be adjusted to make sure that it matches better demand. And there are 2 ways to do it. So there's the fossil fuel plants that we currently have. So this is how currently the system works, is that when the sun is not shining, you turn on the coal power plant. When it stops shining, when it starts shining, you turn it off. And then you try this like almost like an impossible game of like following that.
Yeah.
And then the problem is that in in systems that have very little wind and solar, this is not as challenging, but the more and more wind and solar you have, the more challenging it becomes to do this like following. And lots of power plants can actually not do it properly because they have some limits as to how much they can go down, how much they can go back up. And making sure that they're flexible enough to do it while wind and solar keep growing is like in the early stages is very important.
Right.
And also making sure that, wind and solar, when there's too much, that you can sometimes turn it down when this risks, threatening the system stability.
So, and that also makes sense. I mean, obviously with a coal power plant or a natural gas power plant, they don't have just on and off switches that, these are big, industrial places that take time to power up to full capacity and take time to power down, and as you said, they can't necessarily fully power down because then the rebooting, if you will, is incredibly challenging. So that is a complicated dance during this transition time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to say that basically as clean flexibility and as the energy transition advances, this complicated dance is actually coming to an end. So basically clean flexibility is how you move away from this in a gradual manner. And you move into something a lot more efficient, where you have all of these other solutions like storage and like shifting across time and adjusting demand being enough to make sure that you don't need these coal power plants and gas power plants to just power up and down and just go on and off all the time.
Right. So to me, the storage and the shifting and the sharing and the supplying, those four different aspects of the tools, is there one of those? I mean, they all need to be there. They all need to be functioning and working at capacity. Is there one of those tools that is lacking, that we collectively as humanity needs to put a little bit more research into or effort in improving? So is there a place where there's still growth potential? And I'm imagining storage as a place that still needs some work, but I don't know if that's a correct assumption.
Yeah, so storage is actually one of the most promising new technological solutions that have come and become a real game changer, especially for solar. And when we say storage, there's all kinds of different ways of storing electricity and different tools, because when you say store electricity, there are actually different tools within that storage subset that help you store.
It's not just batteries.
Yeah, exactly. Batteries are the game changer because there's different ways of storing electricity, including like you can pump water up a reservoir and then release it back, and this is also storage.
Hydro, yeah.
But it's limited geographically. Like you can't build such a thing everywhere. But with batteries, you can actually install them anywhere because it's a modular solution. And modularity, like wind and solar, this is what makes them game changers, because you don't depend on geographical conditions or on fuel supply. You just build a manufactured good, you can place it anywhere and scale it up very, very fast. And with batteries, it's really a game changer because they are super fast in terms of response. They're even faster than they're much faster than fossil plants, for example, in terms like how fast they can respond to changes in supply or demand. And also they have very limited losses, like almost no energy is lost in between like the charging and the discharging, and they can scale up super fast. And for batteries, like you're seeing how developments in terms of innovation is really changing the game in terms of like they're becoming cheaper and cheaper, easier to produce, which means that they can scale up faster. And it's this virtuous circle where the technology needs an initial push to start developing, but once it reaches this like virtuous circle where the deployment makes the technology cheaper because we learn how to make it more efficient, and we make more and more and more. And then when it becomes cheaper, it gets deployed even more, and
Yeah.
this helps it
It's-
further reduce costs,
Yep.
and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And batteries have already reached this stage, like especially
We have
for
already.
yeah, they
That's
have.
great.
Like you have so many markets that have already deployed so much batteries. Like for example, California in the US. This is like one of the best examples of like large scale battery deployment, where already in April 2024, batteries were the biggest source in terms of like producing, like giving the most energy to the grid in the evening when the demand is
Yeah.
highest. So they were like giving back more to the grid than gas power plants were producing, more than any other energy source. And they basically can take around a third of the solar output in the middle of the day and then transfer that to the evening, which really is a game changer, because it means that when it's super sunny in the middle of the day, you can take a very big chunk of that and just place it in the evening when the
Right.
sun has already set, and even through the night.
Right.
And this is really huge. And you have all these kinds of very interesting projects that are already popping up. For example, in the Middle East, there is this company that is currently building a large solar power plant with a battery next to it, and it will be providing 1 gigawatt, which is like huge amounts of energy on a constant level. So basically 24/7
Wow.
constant supply from solar with the battery.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. I hadn't heard or learned yet that battery usage has, gotten to that tipping point. I know solar and wind power have gotten to that tipping point where it's actually now cheaper to produce energy with solar and wind than it is for fossil fuel in most cases. But that battery technology, that is a game changer, because that's wonderful news. That's exciting news. So thank you for enlightening me on that, because I didn't know we were that. I know advances are constantly being made with batteries, but I didn't realize there was tangible, successful evidence of how this can be deployed in mass to move more and more towards a clean energy system. So that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, batteries have already reached this stage where they're super cheap and they can make a very big difference, and are being deployed at scale, like in different markets, like in Europe, in the US, in China. And the thing that could be stopping batteries from deploying in a market is no longer the cost of the battery, but it's rather the policy and how the market works, so that allowing the battery to be able to participate and to
Yeah.
be able to provide all of these benefits.
Yeah.
So basically opening up the market and providing these opportunities will create this virtuous circle in other markets in the world as well. But already, like, the decline in costs in just like the last few years in terms of like what has happened to batteries has been so tremendous that it's basically going on this like very steep curve in terms of deployment. And
That's
this is just
wonderful.
the beginning. As I
Yeah.
said, like, this is a true game changer, and more markets are starting to pick up on this opportunity that batteries offer, especially together with solar.
Yeah. That's super exciting in a world full of not always good news. That sounds like it's some really positive news. Um, and it kind of gives me the next question I wanted to ask you. Kind of came out of what you were just talking about. Markets, they're created by man. They're created by policy, right? These are not natural, like gravity. They exist because we created them. So with your expertise and your knowledge, what are like the top 3 priorities or policy suggestions you would make to those in charge of politics and policy, to help facilitate this transition? What do you think that our elected officials should be doing, or we should be demanding that they do if they're not? What's your suggestions?
I would say that thinking about clean flexibility is very important, because for a lot of policymakers and for a lot of people, like, this is not even considered as a concept. Like, they don't even understand what this is. For them, they're still living in the world where you just turn off on and off like the coal and gas power plants, and shifting your mindset to this whole new toolbox of tools that you can use to enable like a fully clean power system is really key, because it's relatively new in the sense that this is a new energy revolution that is driven by technological innovation. And this technological innovation has brought us wind and solar, and now batteries, and also digital technologies, because something we haven't talked about as much as this demand shifting, which is really, really powerful, and where it's very often ignored. And it's actually something that empowers consumers as well, because demand flexibility means that people are empowered to consume cheaper electricity when there is abundance of wind and solar. And this means that your power bill, you have more control and ownership of how you consume electricity, when you consume it, and how cheap it is. Because if you just have like one fixed, for example, power tariff, the chances are that it's relatively high because it balances out all of these like more expensive versus cheaper moments.
Sure.
You don't have any risk, but you also don't have any ownership of your consumption, and you don't understand your consumption. And moving to this new system where you have smart meters, basically allowing you to understand your consumption, to monitor it, but also to control it better, to adapt to these price signals, which means that, for example, you charge your electric vehicle when the sun is shining, or if you're using electricity to heat your home, you're preheating when there's lots of wind, for example. And this means that your power bills can be significantly reduced compared to not doing anything and not understanding your consumption.
Yeah, that makes the smart meter at your house, or the smart appliances that you can then program to pay attention to the grid while you're off doing something else, because we don't have maybe the time to watch the grid and know that, hey, this is peak time or this is not. So these smart appliances and smart meters can do that for you and adjust automatically throughout the day. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So there is, for example, in Norway, like you need to have a smart charger for your EV. So you plug it in and you just press a button saying enable smart charging, and you just leave your electric vehicle be, like you don't have to do anything.
Right.
And then you can earn up to 70 to 100 euros per year from just pressing that button saying enable smart charging. And this means that your EV is charging when the electricity is cheaper, so you're saving on the electricity bill, but you're also getting paid.
You're getting an
for the
incentive.
fact that you're participating in this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes that was another question that I was going to ask, and you touched on it, is that there are then government incentives that can be made into these programs to discourage people from using energy during the peak times, or the difficult times or charge your car, for example, when the energy is abundant. So there are these financial tools that a government could institute if they wish to help citizens use these smart appliances and use them to their advantage. So it benefits everybody that the power is being distributed more efficiently. But then I might get a little extra money in my pocket if I do this program.
No effort.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. I think that is such a creative use of this technology, and I don't know when that will happen here because of the world we're living in now, but it's so exciting to know that it is happening, and that it's possible, and that it is a future that is not too far off. It's actually now, and it can be, as you said, with the change of mindset, we can do these things now. We don't have to wait. So that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also about changing the debate a little bit, because we are getting stuck into this debate about, oh, power prices are too high, and this is because this and that. And then this doesn't enable people to have ownership and to really understand what's going on. And I think that the more consume electricity becomes like having a mobile operator, because it's quite similar, like being able to change your provider and having different plans based on what you need and how you consume. Like it could be like changing your mobile operator
Yeah.
if there is enough demand from people to just like become more aware, and building this awareness and helping people understand and being at like getting more and more knowledge about how the system works and what they can do and how they can be empowered can really change the debate in a meaningful way and get unstuck from this, all renewables are leading to high power prices and it's all their fault, where in reality this is not true. And
Yeah.
all of these like very populist debates can gradually be phased out into something more productive and something more grounded in what is actually happening.
Love that. That's critically important as well in the times that we're in with populist um, conversations happening, not just here in the States, obviously, but in Europe and other parts of the world. That's a rising issue that needs to be addressed, and that sounds like a wonderful way within the realm of energy to have these conversations in a more realistic approach. So, Kostantsa, I want to make sure that I'm giving you enough time here. I want to be respectful of the time. I keep talking to you about this for another hour, but I want to make sure it's evening time for you. I'm sure you want to get on with your night as well. Is there anything else about clean flexibility or your work at Ember that we haven't touched on yet, or that I haven't asked you about, that you want to make sure that you get out and tell me about and tell us about? I just want to make sure that I'm not missing something that you need to make sure that we know.
Yeah, I would say that I think we covered the most important tools that exist. I would say that one of the I would really invite people to get more aware about how the power system works and how it impacts them. Because, as I said, like for many people, turning on the light is something super mundane, and you don't realize like this very big system that is behind it. But in reality, it's a very dynamic and interesting world that the more you understand it, the more you realize how this is going to change radically over the coming years, because we have all these new technologies that are changing the way we produce and consume electricity. And this can change people's lives for much, much better, not just from the perspective of, reducing emissions and improving air quality, for example, from not burning fossil fuels. But it's also about democratization of energy.
Yeah.
Because wind and solar, like especially solar, this is something you can install on your roof. Controlling your energy consumption, this is something you can do as well. And this helps the whole system to become much closer to people and for people to take ownership of it. And I think clean flexibility is very strongly related to that.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I like that idea of getting more ownership of such an important aspect of our life. We all rely on energy. We all need energy to power our lives, and the lights in our homes and our mobile phones and the computers that we're using on our desks and our vehicles that we drive around the community. So having a better personal knowledge of that and understanding of it, and some ownership of it by having solar on your roof or smart appliances and smart meters makes a whole lot of sense to me. So I appreciate all of that. Where can people go? I'll make sure I can put in the show notes links to Ember and links to the Smart Flexibility Report. But is there a place you want to tell people now where they can go to get more information about your work?
Yeah, our website, Ember Energy, we actually revamped it quite recently, so it now looks much sleeker and much better. So emberenergy.org would be where you can go and check our reports. We publish very often all kinds of new reports, not just this clean flexibility report, but updates about what is happening across the world in terms of the energy transition. So if you want to know more about where the world is going, and looking at the data yourself, because we have all these colorful, very easy to use data tools where you can visualize for your own country. You can see where the power is coming from for the year, but also on a monthly basis for many countries. You can check how much different power sources contribute to your country's electricity generation. You can see how much solar produced over the past month. You can see how many emissions were produced from the whole power sector. So all this data is really available for everyone on our website. There's different tools that you can use to look around and play around.
Yeah, it's a great website, and it is clean and it's very user friendly. So I encourage everybody to go check it out. It's a great resource, and again, I'll make sure to include information in the show notes so people can get there and learn more about your important work. You already mentioned kind of this idea of encouraging people to learn more about their energy sources and taking a little bit more personal ownership. Is there anything else as a call to action? Is there, as we're kind of nearing the end here of this conversation, and hopefully folks are as excited and inspired to go learn more about this as I am. What do you want people to do now that they've heard your story?
I would say get informed and demand that the clean energy transition happens, because this is what makes electricity cheaper. But also, we talked so much about geopolitics. Like, if you want locally produced energy, this is the way, and this is the way for you to have clean and cheap electricity. You don't have to import gas from certain countries.
Yeah, those guys.
Or just, yeah, exactly. So basically, this is a transition to a much safer, cleaner energy system. So demanding that this happens, and keeping pressure on policymakers to not succumb to all these populist narratives that can sometimes derail the transition and slow it down. Because actually, it is like what we have seen in Ember is that the transition has reached this critical point where it is now unstoppable. Like, countries across the world are switching to wind and solar because they are cheap, not just because it's some random policy decision.
Yeah.
And so many more countries are also trying to do that as well, and they're growing. Like, these are the fastest sources in terms of growth. Like, wind and solar growing more than any other source of electricity globally for many years already. And this is where the world is going. It cannot be stopped. Some countries could possibly slow it down, but it will not stop from a global perspective. So basically, keeping that in mind would be very, very important.
Perfect. I appreciate that message of encouragement and hope, because you can get lost in the news sometimes and not recognize that reality that the world is moving forward. This transition is happening, and it is unstoppable, as you said, because it's going to happen. It is happening, and it needs to happen. So love all of that. We do talk a little bit about hope on the show, and in kind of ending on that idea that there's hope in the energy transition is unstoppable. But I also want to talk to you a little bit about what makes you hopeful. And hope is this idea. It's not just a fluffy emotion. It's actually, those who study hope don't even define it as emotion. It's really kind of a mindset. It's, you have a vision for a better future. You have an idea of how to get to that future. There's steps or a plan or a process you can take to get there. You may not know it all, but you have a direction to go in. And you have this sense of agency, that there's something I can do to make this vision happen. Doesn't mean it won't be difficult, and doesn't mean there won't be challenges, and you might fail, but that's, you have a vision, you have a process, and you have a sense that you can get there and do it. So I want to ask you 3 questions about your hopes. So the first question, Kostantsa, is, what is your vision for a better future? It can be for you personally or professionally or for the world. Like what's your hopeful vision for the future?
Yeah, I, I think I'm mostly hopeful for an acceleration of the clean transition. And I'm saying that from the perspective of like seeing more solar panels, seeing more windmills, producing electricity. I think this would help in terms of not just making sure that the air is cleaner and that climate change doesn't happen as fast, but you know, just empowering people and countries to have access to that, because this is a completely different world. Because if you have a situation where electricity was produced like by very big power plants and then distribute to everyone, and you don't have any power, yeah, like you either plug in or you're not connected and you don't have access to electricity. And this is so much more empowering because you can install a solar panel on your roof, you can have a battery, you can even use your ev as a battery, and you can be self-sustained, or you could have whole communities that can build together, like, and like co-own a solar power plant. Or you can have agricultural, like, you know, farmers building solar next to crops, and then you can have this very beneficial coexistence between like solar and crops. And all of these things means that you give the energy back to people themselves, and they can have more ownership about what's going on. You don't depend on larger coal power plants. You don't depend on different countries and on like the fuels being delivered. So I think, I really hope we can get there. Uh, and not like, this is a hope for, you know, all kinds of countries, but especially for global south countries. Like
Yeah.
imagining all of this electricity access getting there with these technologies. I think this can have lead us to a more peaceful world as well,
Yeah.
where fossil fuels are not as critical, and where geopolitics and energy is not as political as it is today.
Yeah. I want to dig a little bit deeper. I love the vision, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. But the second question is why? And again, you kind of talked on that a little bit. There's peace involved in this transition. There's empowerment, personal empowerment involved in this. But is there anything else you want to add into, like, why is that your vision? The transitioning to clean energy faster is a part of your vision that you just want to add on to that answer.
Yeah, I think just the elephant in the room, I would say, which is climate change. I would say that making sure that we don't have extreme weather events, or we limit that as much as possible. This is really critical. And I really want to think that we still have time and we can still do this. It just means that we need to keep going, not forget the end goal. And yeah, I really hope that this is something we can achieve.
Perfect. Now, last question about your hope for a better future. Imagine for a moment that the future you just described is real and it's right now. We've completed the energy transition, and globally, in the global south is seeing the benefits from it, and there's a more peaceful planet because we're not in these geopolitical conflicts over oil and gas, and so we're living in that future you just described. How does that make you feel to know that that's the world we're living in?
I would say relieved. I think I would feel lots of relief if that were true and we would get there. And I really hope that uh, this is going to happen during our lifetime,
Yeah.
because this is something like we are living in a truly historical moment. And this can be at the same time scary, but also very empowering and full of hope. And I do think that this generation, like this, where we are as humanity right now, we can change the world into something much, much better within our lifetime. And we have the technologies to do it. So, yeah, I think I would feel relieved and happy.
Perfect. Well, Kostantsa, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for your expertise and knowledge, and sharing it in a way that's attainable to me and an average audience who aren't, as you described, energy nerds. So I appreciate that storytelling ability that you have to take this really data-driven analysis that you do and explain it in a way that is understandable for all of us. That was really brilliant, and I'm grateful for your time, and I'm grateful for your work. Thank you for all that you're doing to help expedite that energy transition to get us to that better world that we're all trying to get to.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share this story. It was a really great pleasure to talk to you and to share this story. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, I wish you all the best, and look forward to reading your next report.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. What an insightful conversation with Kostantsa Rangelova. In this episode, we explored the evolution of global energy markets, the critical role of clean flexibility in the energy transition, and the importance of using data to drive informed decision-making. Growing up in Bulgaria in the 90s, which was a time of uncertainty and transformation following the fall of the Soviet Union, Kostantsa shared how her early experiences shaped her resilience and passion for energy policy. And her journey from an aspiring journalist to energy analyst also demonstrates the power of adaptability and lifelong learning. And for me, one of the key takeaways from today's discussion is the power of storytelling in making complex data accessible. Kostantsa is a master communicator, and not all scientists and data analysts have that skill set. She explained clean flexibility beautifully, using the analogy that renewable energy is the heart, while clean flexibility is the brain. And storing, shifting, sharing, and supplying are the tools used by the brain, or clean flexibility, to keep our heart, or our clean energy sources, reliable and efficient. It's this ability to break down difficult concepts into digestible pieces that makes sustainability issues more understandable to policymakers and everyday people alike. Kostantsa reminded us that compelling narratives aren't just about numbers. They're about real-life stories, clear language, and relatable analogies. This is the kind of storytelling that drives real change, and I deeply appreciate her ability to bring these ideas to life for us today. I want to thank Kostantsa for joining me on Stories Sustain Us and for her incredible work advancing the global clean energy transition, which, she said, thankfully, with so much passion and just belief that this clean energy transition is unstoppable. Her insights and dedication are making the world a better place. For those of you listening, I hope Kostantsa's story inspired you just as it did me to take action in your own community. Whether it's learning more about clean energy policies, advocating for better renewable energy initiatives, or simply making small changes in your daily energy consumption, every effort counts. So thank you for what you're doing to make the world a better place as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please support Stories Sustain Us by sharing it with your family and friends, liking and following the show, and leaving a comment. Your engagement helps me to bring these inspiring stories to you. So thank you for supporting the show. And be sure to join me for the next episode, releasing on April 1st, where we'll dive into the incredible work being done to protect and restore the Anacostia River. My next inspirational guest will share how they are bringing partners and communities together to achieve a clean and safe Anacostia River for all who live in its watershed, now and for future generations. Catch the next episode of Stories Sustain Us on April 1st. It'll be available at storiessustainus.com, wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. Thank you for being here today, and please keep making the world a better place, one story at a time. Till next time, I'm Stephen Shower. Please take care of yourself and each other. Take care.